What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Charter Podcast, brought to you by St. Xavier University. Ruthie Polinsky, 𝗏𝗏 Shapiro, 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗃 back with you after a long weekend. It feels like not a little bit of a quiet time for the NFL right now. A couple teams started rookie minicamp. The Bears will hold their rookie minicamp this Friday through Sunday. So we took the time upon us, really Alex and Clay did, because I was off the grid. But Alex and Clay did some really awesome interviews over the course of last week and weekend, and we are going to play both of those interviews for you today. Clay caught up with 𝗵𝗍𝗋𝗄. He's the wide receivers coach at Mizzou, so he is very familiar with Luther Burden III. And Alex got a chance to speak with Sean Spencer. He is one of the D-line coaches for Texas A&M. They talked a lot about Shemar Turner. They're both fantastic interviews, guys. Great stuff. We're going to play the 𝗵𝗍𝗋𝗄 interview for everyone first. So, Clay, just kind of want to, without giving anything away, what was sort of your mission going into that interview with 𝗵𝗍𝗋𝗄? What did you want to learn from 𗗵𝗍𝗋𝗄? And then on the other side of that interview, we'll sort of recap it. But I'm just curious, like, what were your hard-hitting questions that you wanted to gain from him?
Well, first things first, I wanted to kind of see what kind of a teammate Luther Burden is, because sometimes what you're hearing out there, obviously the Steve Smith thing, and some people had questions about maybe his maturity level or what happens if he's not getting targeted. So I wanted to get to the bottom of that. I wanted to see the strengths and weaknesses of Luther Burden's game. You know, obviously we see he's a slot guy, but maybe can he play outside? You know, Ben Johnson loves to put guys in different positions, find ways to get different mismatches. Is there a possibility maybe you can even see this guy get some carries like a Deebo Samuel type guy? So I wanted to ask him about that. And then just anything the normal person wouldn't know. What do we not know about Luther Burden that you can tell us, and just get the insight from a guy that worked with them on a day-to-day basis, in the receiver room with them, watching film, on the field with them, got to see him up close and personal. How's he practice? How's he play? Is he a competitor? So those were the things that I really wanted to see going into the interview.
Alex, I'm sure you saw Eli Drinkwitz's reaction to Steve Smith's comments. He had a reaction on the score. He was asked about what Steve Smith had to say, and he basically completely shut down all of the criticism around Luther Burden III, around his work ethic, around his, sort of when he's not getting the ball, he's not going as hard, those sorts of things. I think, of course, the Mizzou coaching staff is going to shine their player in the best light possible, but I also think the way that these coaches have shut these sort of rumblings down has been very authentic and has felt very, very solid. You're not sitting there listening to them dance around those questions. So I'm curious, Alex, what was your reaction to hearing some of the criticism around Luther Burden III? And then obviously we'll listen to what 𝗵𝗍𝗋𝗄 has to say, but just sort of the way you think he'll react and respond.
Yeah. So, first off, when Luther Burden starts to fall, you have questions. Why is Luther Burden III falling? This guy looks like a first-round talent. He said he expected to be drafted in the first round. Why didn't that happen? Right? You can quibble over whether Ted McMillan or Matthew Golden is the top guy, but he was the 5th or 6th wide receiver off the board, depending on what you think about Travis Hunter, right? So when you hear these reports, these rumors, whatever, what have you, it maybe makes you go, oh, okay, interesting. How much truth is there to that? So it's great that now we have heard 𝗵𝗍𝗋𝗄's response. And, I have the advantage. I have listened to the interview. Part of pre-production, I got to listen to it ahead of time. So hearing those insights, it's exactly as you said, Ruthie. It's not just lip service, because you can kind of tell when you're getting lip service. He says things, I'll give a little tease, that, make me feel a little less concerned when he says, listen, when he was getting blanketed coverage, when there's a safety over the top and they're taking him away, he's still blocking his tail off for his running backs. That's a specific thing that he's pointing out. He's not just saying, oh, yeah, he's a great teammate. He's saying, no, when he was taken away and he wasn't getting the ball, he still blocked in our run game. Something specific that he pointed to. So yeah, those types of real insights from a guy who coached him for a long time, obviously very valuable.
All right. Well, since Alex just told us what he says in the interview, no need to play it for everyone. I'm just kidding. I think we should listen to it, guys, because we're going to have a lot to talk about on the other side. So without further ado, here is Jacob Peeler, the wide receivers coach at Mizzou.
And as promised, now we are joined by Missouri wide receiver coach, recruiting coordinator, Jacob Peeler. Jacob, obviously, University of Missouri coach over here. Obviously, I went to Missouri State University, so keeping the same state. How you doing today, Jacob?
Doing great. Glad to be here.
Now, appreciate you joining us. So obviously, we wanted to reach out and get you on the show as a part of the Chicago Sports Network and the Charter podcast. Everybody's obviously interested in your former wide receiver, Luther Burden. Can you just tell us about him as a person and as a competitor?
Yeah, number one, I think you hit the nail on the head when you say competitor. It's a kid that literally he's going to want to win at everything. I mean, we do things around here, whether it's dodgeball, whether it's playing video games. I mean, obviously football. The dude's competitive character is off the charts. I mean, he wants to win, and he wants to win now. And so I think that's the biggest thing that from him is he's a very quiet, unassuming, kind of stoic kid. But then all of a sudden you drop a ball in or make it competitive, you better watch out. So he's obviously got that to him.
So more on the football side of things, watching a little bit of tape on Luther. To me, it looks like maybe he's more used in the slot. I think you guys use him at about 80% in the slot. Do you think he has the ability to play outside as well? And does he have any ability maybe to take some snaps out of the backfield?
Yeah, that's what he does. Number one, I mean, we asked him to move around a lot. We were a big motion shift team. I mean, you would have seen him line up in the backfield to try to get matched up on linebackers. Obviously, early in his career as a true freshman, he played predominantly wide out for us, and then we moved him in the slot his sophomore season. So definitely has position flexibility. Even this year at times, I mean, I recall the Texas A&M game. We started him out first play of the game, put him outside and threw him a back shoulder fade, big play off the jump. So definitely has position flexibility. And again, we try to move him around a lot. So he's used to that world from a motion shift standpoint.
I have to ask you about this one. And I don't know if you've seen the interview with Steve Smith on the 89 podcast where Steve Smith breaks down all of the receivers in the draft class. Now, he had some interesting things to say about Luther, about his personality, maybe that he's a guy that doesn't that's not a good teammate. Some things how does that make you feel when you see a guy that maybe doesn't know Luther saying some things like that and talking about him as if he knows him?
Yeah, not familiar with the podcast, obviously familiar with Steve Smith. Number one, I will say this, Luther Burden is a great teammate. He's very well respected, not only in our locker room, but in the receiver room. And again, you're talking about a guy that shows up every day, and he was as selfless as it comes. I mean, if you look back to the 23 season, teams started really trying to take him away as the season went on, started playing safety over top, and was blocking his tail off in the run game for our running back at the time, 𝗬𝗄𝑔𝘄𝗓 Schrader. And so again, I can't speak on that, but I can only speak on what I see and what I know from the 3 years with him. And I'm excited about him in Chicago. I think it's going to be a great fit for him.
That's good to hear. Were you a little bit shocked when Luther fell out of the first round? Were you expecting him to go round one?
Honestly, one thing I've been fortunate to coach some guys that go through this process. You're at the mercy of the NFL, and so no, I mean it is what it is. I know he's excited to hear his name, and I know he was really excited about the fit and going to Chicago. But no, I mean one thing I know now after going through this process with several other guys is there is no surprises. You just take it when your name is called and obviously he was excited about that.
I love to hear it. So if you had to maybe give me a couple of strengths, things that Luther Burden does very well, and maybe a couple of weaknesses, or not necessarily weaknesses, but things that you expect he can improve on. Obviously, he'll be with wide receiver coach Antwaan Randall, Ben Johnson, a great new offensive staff that everybody's excited about here in Chicago. But what would a couple of his strengths and maybe a couple of weaknesses or things that he could improve on be as he makes this jump to the next level?
Yeah, number one, strength-wise, is yards after catch. I mean, if you notice, I mean, when he gets the ball in his hands, the play just started. I mean, his ability to make not only the first defender, but sometimes the second and third defender miss. I mean, he is as good that I've seen and been around from a yards after catch standpoint. Number two, I think in one-on-one situations, he is dominant when it gets to one-on-one. Obviously, I think that's what translates most to the next level is you're going to see a lot of man coverage and his ability to defeat man coverage, not only in games, but he, consistently did in practice. And, for us, we were fortunate. We had three DBs drafted last year in last year's NFL draft. And that's who he went against every single day, as a sophomore, as a freshman. And so that helps him obviously translate that to the next level this last couple of years. But from a part to work on, I think constantly that's the one thing with him is sometimes you get young players and they just want to watch the plays they do well. They didn't want to see the bad plays or hear, hey, how do I need to improve? He constantly was open to feedback, opening to, hey, how do I get better at this versus, specific leverage points of a defense, or, hey, this coverage, they're playing me this way. So I think as he got through the process as a freshman, as a sophomore, into his junior year, really grew in that regard, is understanding, hey, coverages, understanding leverage points of the defense, and just continued that football IQ as he went through his career. And I think too, you nailed it. Just he's going to be expected, I imagine, to play multiple positions and move all over the field, and not only be, as a slot, but also had to play wide out. So just continue to hone his craft with being able to move all over the place at the next level. I think will be good for him.
That's good to hear. Yeah, obviously Ben Johnson's MO is he wants to make the same things look different things look the same, multiple formations, multiple different personnel groupings. And I think from what I've seen, Luther fits right into that. There's a little bit of a dip in production from, say, 2023 to 2024 for Luther. What can you attribute that to, Coach?
Yeah, I mean, football, right? Different, obviously he's not going to sneak on the scene, coming out of an All-American season. And so, for us, I mean, unfortunately we had some injuries at some key positions, obviously the quarterback position at times, and we just missed on some plays and early in the season too. And I mean, it wasn't, the biggest thing I would say taken away from it is just his approach every day didn't change. Obviously you play receiver, that is a quote unquote selfish position, right? I mean, you want the ball or you're playing the wrong position. But you're talking about a kid that showed up with the same mindset every day, was, again, like I mentioned earlier, a great teammate, awesome on the sideline, never complained once. And, some guys in that situation with what he had on his plate could have gone the other way. Never did, not once. But again, I'm just excited. I think what he does, his skill set, and what Coach Johnson has done, historically with his offense, it's a really good fit. And I'm excited to see how that translates. And I know he's hungry to go prove himself. And, obviously we'll see how it goes.
Absolutely. Just a couple more for you here, Coach. I think I heard a rumor that Luther's dad and grandpa were professional athletes.
Yeah, his dad was a big basketball player. And if you ask Luther, he'll tell you he's pretty good on the court. He played in high school and had some success there. And you kind of see a basketball player a little bit, in Luther. But yeah, his dad was a really good player. I can't say grandfather. I'm not 100% positive on that, so I don't want to say the wrong thing. But yeah, his dad was a really good player in his own right, and you can see some of that in Luther's game.
I love that. The basketball players, obviously tight ends, former basketball players. All right, Coach, last one for you here. Give us a prediction here on Luther Burden, he was 39th pick in the draft. Do you see him as a guy that could come in and start right away?
Mentality, mindset wise, I know that's what he's going to come in to do. I mean, I'll tell you, he's got a little something to prove. We say that around here at Mizzou a lot, STP, and I know he's excited. I talked to him a couple nights ago, and he was already, chomping at the bit to get up there. And so I don't want to make a prediction and put anything on it, but I know that, just his track record alone and what he was able to do here, and then obviously in high school, he comes in with a mindset ready to work. So I'm excited to see it myself. I'm transitioning from coach to fan, and so I get to be like everybody else, and I'll be obviously keeping close tabs on him throughout the season.
Appreciate you, Coach. Appreciate all the insight on the Bears. Second-round draft pick, Luther Burden. Appreciate your time. And if you end up playing my Missouri State Bears, make sure to take it easy on them and not run up the score. But appreciate your time, Coach.
No, absolutely. Appreciate you guys for having me.
Great stuff there, Clay. Really good job interviewing and sort of asking the challenging questions to someone who obviously has a lot of admiration and respect for Luther Burden III. It's his player. He coached him. I'm sure he feels so proud to see him go to the NFL. And one of the things I loved about what Coach Peeler said there was, you asked, were you surprised to see him fall to the second round? And he said, this is football. Like this, nothing surprises me anymore. Things are weird. Things get weird. And the conversation about his drop in production, of course, everyone's looking at right now. You're saying Luther Burden III, his production was this, and this. But then when you hear the context from Coach Peeler about the quarterback issues and just sort of the way the roster was just not always clicking on every cylinder and some of the adversity that Mizzou as a team faced, it all sort of makes sense to you as to, okay, his potential's still there, but the situation he was in had just changed a lot. What was your biggest takeaway, Clay, from what Coach Peeler had to say?
So I had a couple of them. And first, I think is something that we all knew and saw on the film, but just to hear it from him is Luther Burden's just ability to run after the catch. And, I looked up some statistics, and he broke 49% of his catches. He broke at least one tackle after the catch, and that was number one in the entire draft class. And what Coach Peeler said was, the play's not over when he catches the ball. The play's not over when he makes the first guy miss. The play's over when he makes, the second or the third guy miss. So this guy's got some elite run after the catch. And then I asked him, watching this tape, obviously I was really impressed with what he did, but he lined up 85% of his snaps in the slot last year. And I know how Ben Johnson likes to move the guys around a lot. And does that mean there's a lack of versatility here for him to be an outside receiver? Because 85%, that's a lot. If you're lining someone in the 60% in the slot, to me, that's a slot receiver, but 85%? So ask him that question. He goes, his freshman year, he played outside and he did a great job of it. We loved him outside. And I looked back at the statistics there, and he lined up 85% at outside receiver his freshman year. They moved him inside just so they could utilize him as a weapon more. Instead of guys being able to bracket him, double cover, put a safety over the top. Now you're utilizing him more as a weapon. And we know that's what Ben Johnson likes, is guys that are weapons. And the other thing that he said was, that I think is important, is the fact that he was in a lot of motion. This guy was utilized in a motion and shift offense, and that's tough for some players. It's different running routes out of motion. It's different hearing a play call out of motion. It's different shifting and then being able to see the defense to know exactly what you're doing instead of having a static picture. So to me, that's also something big that will elevate his game and make his time to learn and pick up this offense a little bit quicker. And he'll pick it up a little bit better because he's done things like that. So that was my 3 takeaways there.
Alex, what about you? What did you learn about Luther Burden III there?
Yeah, it was kind of the dealing with the adversity, dealing with getting bracketed, not getting the ball. I already mentioned off the top, I stole my own thunder, or stole Peeler's thunder, by saying, he was blocking really well in the run game. But it's not just that. It was how he approached the game, how he approached the classroom. He said he's the same guy. like getting the ball, not getting the ball. He was the same guy. He was asking questions. How do I get better? Attacking the film room. Hey, what can I do to out leverage a cornerback if I'm getting this type of coverage? So, trying to work on his football IQ. And then when Clay asked, hey, okay, what are some of his weaknesses? He basically said, like, it's something that every player can work on. It's just that continuation of learning the football IQ, getting more and more familiar. When I see this and the cornerback is lined up that way, here are some ways I can set him up to better get open, so just building and building and building, which, obviously isn't necessarily a weakness. that is just stuff that he can continue to work on. And then the other thing that I thought was great, and this came across to us right away after he was drafted. And he basically said, I texted him a couple of days ago. He feels like he has something to prove. And that can be great. If that is channeled properly, it can be great. And it sounds like he's the type of player that he will use that properly, right? He said, other players, when they're not getting the ball, it can go one of two ways. It can go a bad way. It was never like that with Luther in his experience. So now that he has something to prove, that he's chomping at the bit to get in and get on the field, that type of competitive energy, right? He's a mega competitor. Dodgeball, video games, football, whatever. He just wants to win. That type of competitive energy is going to be huge in this extremely stacked wide receivers room. Like, he's going to need that competitive edge. If he feels like he has something to prove, I loved hearing that, because to me, it's like, okay, this is how this guy is going to succeed. This is how this guy is going to break through in a very crowded wide receivers room.
I think after listening to that interview with Coach Peeler, I got really excited thinking about Luther Burden being in a receiver room with DJ Moore and Rome Odunze, two guys who go about their business, who work really hard, who set a really good example. They lead by example, not by, being too loud or talking about all the work they're doing. They are just professionals, the ultimate professionals, arguably two of the most professional guys in the entire locker room are DJ Moore and Rome Odunze. And I just think there's going to be such a great learning experience there for him. Of course, the wide receivers coach, Antoine Randall L., is going to be able to rein in whatever sort of, maybe concerns there are, if there are any. And so I think if anyone's able to handle and absorb the, Clay, you didn't want to say weaknesses, but maybe some of the, areas that Luther Burden III can improve on and grow on. I think that's just a great situation for him to be walking into. And I think that's really what got me so excited about listening to, what Jacob Peeler had to say there. So it's really cool. The more we learn about Luther Burden III, the more excited I get. I think this is someone that can contribute to this Bears offense in so many different ways. And I think it's someone that Ben Johnson can get creative with. And it's just going to be really cool to see sort of how he, fits into this Bears offense. Moving forward, fellas, I think we can advance the conversation. Now we'll go to the defensive side of the ball because Clay, yeah.
Oh, Clay.
I just wanted to let you guys know I'm not crazy. Luther Burden's grandfather was a basketball player for the New York Knicks.
There you go.
He was. I knew I heard that somewhere, and this guy played in the CBA, played in the ABA, played in the NBA. This guy was a very well-known basketball player. And when I asked Jordan Peeler that, he's like, I have no idea about the grandfather, but his dad played, and his dad played basketball as well. And obviously Luther Burden was a very successful high school basketball player that had offers to play in college as well. So I'm not crazy for asking that one. He really was a player, his grandfather for the New York Knicks.
Clay, if we know anything about you, it's that you are prepared and you do your research and your homework. I never doubted you.
Okay.
So, yeah. I had no doubts in my mind. When you said it, I was like, I'm sure that is true.
But I'm sure it's true. Okay, great stuff. Now we can move this conversation forward because we have another fantastic interview for you to listen to. Alex Shapiro spoke with Sean Spencer. He is one of the two D-line coaches at Texas A&M. And he had the privilege, it sounds like, to coach Shemar Turner throughout his career at Texas A&M and has a lot of great things to say. Before we get into it, Alex, I guess sort of the hard conversations to have around Shemar Turner are the penalties and, crossing that line of being, playing with violence and actually being violent, right? Like on the field to the point where it causes and hurts your team. But those are topics that you were able to discuss with Sean Spencer.
Yeah, exactly. Just the insight of how, what was your coaching strategy? Because obviously every player needs to be coached differently. So what worked with him to try and dial that back, to try and, make sure he wasn't costing the team with the personal fouls. And then I also just wanted insight on the move to defensive tackle because, typically, I don't know, there's usually an inciting incident. If a guy is an all-conference player at defensive end, what happened that you moved him to DT and asked him to transform his body, which he absolutely did. And it was actually a very Occam's razor type answer. So it made a ton of sense when Harry was like, oh yeah, duh. Like, obviously that's why you moved him to DT. So he also had some really good insights and just shared some more about his character on the field and off the field. Cause this is a tough dude. And basically he's like, yeah, man, he's tougher than you would even imagine.
Clay, what are some of the things you're looking forward to hearing? I know you've already listened to it, but pretend you haven't for a moment. What do you want to know about Shemar Turner from his college coach?
A little bit about, Alex had an amazing job of, asking some of those tough questions. Like you guys said, I loved his answer when Alex did ask him about the penalties and you guys will hear the response. I thought it was hilarious. And then also the versatility and the question of the versatility. And I think excellent answer. And I like Shemar Turner, but I wasn't completely sold on him. And after listening to this interview and just how glowingly the coaches talks about him and his personality and his practice routine and how he does all the things that he does, I'm a lot more excited about Shemar Turner's future here with the Bears.
All right, so without any further ado, let's take a listen to Sean Spencer, the co-D-line coach for the Texas A&M Aggies, who had the privilege of coaching Shemar Turner, one of the newest Chicago Bears.
All right, now we are joined by Texas A&M defensive line coach Sean Spencer. Sean, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
Oh, of course. So we got to meet Shemar Turner a little bit ago, and this guy just has an infectious personality. And then when you put on the tape, you can see how that energy, that infectious attitude really translates. So I'm just curious, what were the ways, or in what way was he a tone setter for you guys? Was it on the field, off the field? How did that personality, how that infectious attitude translate to your team?
Well, one of the things is, it's two of us. So it's myself and Tony Ghirardelli, that coach the defensive line. And Tony had an outstanding long relationship with him, dating back to when he helped recruit him to come to Texas A&M. So, obviously, there's a lot of trust developed, you know what I mean? And, the departure of Coach E, was tough for Shemar, I think. But, in terms of him, buying into what we wanted to do, and he was with Elko when he was a freshman, Coach Elko, and obviously he goes hard in practice, from start to finish. Every rep is full speed. His drill work is unbelievable. Just the consistency and patience he has to detail his technique. And that's one of the reasons I think he's going to have a lot of success at the next level. I even talked to Javon Dexter about him, and I was telling him, you're going to be excited to play with him. I said, because both of you cats are crazy.
Oh, Javon. So you have a relationship with Javon Dexter?
Yeah, I coached him at Florida. Yes, sir.
Oh, amazing. Wow. Okay. So interestingly, Javon obviously was this 2-gapper at Florida, and then the Bears are asking him to be a 1-gapper. It seems like it is going to be the same with Shemar. Do you think that's an opportunity where Shemar can learn for Javon, or what in Shemar's game tells you that he can have success as a 1-gapper, making that transition from a 2-gapper?
Well, last year we really didn't play a lot of two gap. I mean, we obviously played gap and a half based on the block, right? But as much as Javon had to do, Javon is really was like at times he really was a two gap player, but we played more of a shaded front here at Texas A&M, and so this will not be like uncommon for Shemar. So I don't think the transition is really going to be hard. He's played on the edge. He was a five technique, and he was all conference when he was a five technique, and then moved inside and transitioned to a kind of like a 3-2 guy, and at times a zero in the sub package. So the transition won't be hard for him at all. Explosive, quick first step, strong hands, quick at the point of attack. I mean, all the things that would be highly successful in that type of.
You mentioned the transition from outside to inside. What went into that decision to move him from five tech to an interior guy?
So I think once we came here, like, in order to all the guys on the field. So you had like Shemar Stewart, first round pick. You had Nick Gordon, second round pick. You had him, Shemar Turner, was a three. So now you got three top picks in the draft like that you could put on the field at the same time. Shemar Turner could have definitely played the big end spot for us, but it was more beneficial to the team and a testament to the kid that, after being an all-conference player that was outside, was willing inside for the betterment of the team.
And then not everybody can make that transition. I heard he put on over 30 pounds to move inside, and not everybody can do that. So what were the things that made him successful moving from the edge to the interior?
So really, he gets a gap closer to the football, really, right? So you're a five technique, you're in the C gap, you're outside shade on the tackle. If you're a three technique, you're outside shade on the guard. So clearly, at that point in time, there's more people that can block you. So like taking on double teams and things like that. One of the coolest things about him was, we had played against some teams that really didn't run like what we call duo and double teams. Really didn't run that. And then when we were going into one of the games, the teams we were playing, he knew that they were running it. And he was so excited. He was like, I get to strike somebody and take on some double teams. I was like, well, that's one approach to it. And that was good,
I love it. Now, with somebody whose motor runs so hot, we saw some of the personal fouls. We saw some of the flags. What are the challenges for you as a coach to dial him back and play up to the edge of the line, but not cross that line? What was the key for you guys there?
Well, obviously we curbed those things from his first couple of years to last year. And, some of those things teetered on, right at the line, right? And then you don't want him to cross it, but he's going to learn, like, how to approach the game a different way. It's hard, man, to turn that guy's motor off, right? Like, you don't want to turn it off, but you don't want to get costly penalties. And I think he learned from that. And he understands that, like, really at that level, he's going to have to change that type of stuff. But it's not a problem. It's not going to be a problem. You know what I mean? Or you're getting a dog, man. You know what I mean? So sometimes the dog want to jump off the porch. You got to hold him back on a leash, but you want him to get up. You want him to be ready to jump off that porch at any time to take the intruder. So that's the kind of guy you're going to get.
Yeah. You say he's a dog. I mean, played through the pain of a stress fracture, had the rod in his leg. What did you learn about Shemar as he's gutting through what seems to be what I would imagine is a very painful situation with those stress fractures, staying on the field and playing through it?
Well, absolutely, just a tough individual, right? Like him and Javon are two of the toughest guys I've coached at the college level, and just tough. And you never really knew it because you never complained about it, right? Like so, and it didn't affect the way he practiced. It didn't affect the way he played. So obviously, this threshold of pain is on another level, almost inhuman. But, he'll learn how to manage that at the next level, and, they'll take care of him, and he'll be prepared for the game.
And then last question, what do people not know about Shemar Turner that they should know?
Well, I think the exterior of that personality, that dog mentality, that, crazy guy on the field that coaches love. Off the field, man, he keeps to himself. He's just a normal guy, man. Keeps to himself, never, not a guy that's going to go out and act up. Like, he's just really reserved, man, and just enjoys being around his family and being around his friends. And, the exterior that you see on the field is what you want, right? But just uniquely, when he's, when football's over, he's just going home by himself. So, and he's just hanging out with, like I said, with his family or his buddies. And, he's a real, more of an introvert that way than you would expect from a guy that plays at that level.
Amazing. Well, Sean Spencer, defensive line coach for Texas A&M, joining us on the recruiting trail. Thank you so much, Sean. Really appreciate your time.
Yes, sir, man. I enjoyed it. I had this coffee macchiato, man, with almond milk. Highly recommend it. Get it hot. You know what I'm saying? Get you a tall one. Get you through the day.
All right, Clay, I think I know what your favorite part of that interview was, when Sean Spencer called Shemar Turner a dog. When the dog wants to jump off the porch, you got to hold him back with a leash, but you always want him to be able to jump off the porch if there's an intruder. So there's, I think there's a lot to learn there from his D-line coach, who also has a very infectious personality. You can see probably why the two of them worked well together and why Sean Spencer spoke so glowingly of his player. How about the fact that he has experience with Gervon Dexter, Alex? That was a great little nugget that we didn't know.
Yeah, amazing. I didn't do my due diligence to look at Sean Spencer's full history to see that he was in Florida before he was at A&M. So, and that was, he kind of corrected the record there a little bit, because there was this narrative that, okay, he's going to have to do this 2-gapper to 1-gapper thing. And he was like, not so fast. It was really a gap and a half. And we did this shade thing. And it was harder for Gervon. Because he was really doing 2-gap stuff, read and react, catching blocks rather than attacking the gap, right? So like changing your instincts on how to attack things. Like, Shemar is going to be fine. And then one of the things I loved is that when they made this move, and they finally played a team that was going to double team him, he was like, all right, I finally get to attack a double team. This is going to be great. Normally, you would not like that. You want one-on-ones, because it's a whole lot easier to win a one-on-one than against a combo block. But he was looking forward to taking on a double team to check it out. It gives you insight to this guy's competitive spirit, his competitive edge, that he wanted this big-time challenge. So yeah, that Gervon Dexter connection is great. What do you say? Just 2 crazy cats or something. So yes, that was definitely a fun moment. And then to bring it back to the Occam's razor of why they moved him to DT, it was because Nick Scorton transferred from Purdue. And how do you get Shemar Turner, and Nick Scorton all at the field at the same time? Somebody's got to move inside, and that somebody was Shemar Turner. So another great insight, where this guy, all conference player, out on the edge, but you know what? We got a transfer here, Nick Scorton from Purdue, and we want to get you guys on the field together. That is what's going to be best for our team. Can you move inside? Can you put on the weight? He goes, yeah, no problem. I got it. And that's probably something that helped him get drafted, or, shows that, hey, I could play 5-tech. I can also play 0. That versatility is huge. So loved that insight about the move from defensive end to defensive tackle for him.
Clay, what did you like and what did you learn from Coach Spencer?
The first thing that stood out to me is the fact that this guy treats practice like a game. And that's something that when you're a big-time player, an all-conference player, all-American player, I've been around some guys that are maybe prima donna. They take their foot off the gas pedal at practice. They don't think they have to practice as hard. But Coach saying he treats every single practice like it's a game. So that shows you this guy has love for football. And that's the type of guy you want on your team, because when you get a bunch of guys in there that practice hard, that's contagious. That's the flu. This catches on to everybody else on your team. They all start playing hard in practice. It raises that competition level. So overall, I think that is excellent when you bring in players like that. And then the other part I really, really liked to hear was the fact that this guy just has unbelievable positional versatility. And that's also something you want in the D-line, especially with Dennis Allen. And when you've seen injuries in the past, obviously Big Bill went down last year. That hurt. But knowing this guy can play a 0 technique, a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4. And basically all that means, if nobody knows, is that's just the further away you get from the center. So he can go from next to the center all the way to, lined up over a tight end. So he's got that kind of positional versatility. So to me, that's incredible. That's huge. If there's any depth issues, if Dio goes down, maybe Shemar Turner can take on Dio's role. If Gervon Dexter goes down, he can play there. So I think that was very important, and something that I had questions about. And then also, the dog comment, great question. Okay, can you reel this guy in with the type of player he is? And I think Coach asked him perfectly, hey, he knows he's going to the next level. He's going to have to reel it in, but he's a dog. Okay, he's a dog, and you're holding a dog back with the leash, and but you want him to be able to go after that burglar, that intruder, if he comes in your house, and that's the type of guy you got in Chicago. So I love that comment as well. And like I said, I wasn't super excited about Shemar Turner. I turned on the film and I thought he played well. He played with a motor, and a guy, but after listening to Coach and hearing some of these things about the type of person he is, how hard he practices, his versatility, I'm more excited and think that the Bears really did get a good player here.
The other thing that really made an impression upon me is that it kind of said they didn't know he had a stress fracture, that they didn't know there was a problem, that he was hurt because it didn't affect his practice. It didn't affect the way he was playing, and he didn't complain about it, right? He said his pain tolerance, practically inhuman. So that's kind of like a learning moment and a really good thing. The pain tolerance is obviously important, and you want tough guys that will stay on the field. So obviously you are getting a very tough guy who will stay on the field. If he is good to go, he'll go. But then also you also should probably tell your coaches when you're feeling something so you can get the medical attention. And he kind of alluded to that. He's like, he'll know now, and they'll take good care of him and make sure he's playing up to his staff. But that was also such an incredible insight. The DL coach didn't know he was dealing with a stress fracture because he wasn't complaining and it wasn't affecting the way he played. What a tough SOB to be.
That's what you want. That's contagious too. And after last year, when we saw Nate Davis, the day of the game, come out and say, he's got back issue. The day of the game, you have a back issue? We've been practicing all week and all of a sudden you can't play? Braxton Jones, and I'm not trying to call these guys out, but just situations. You have a Monday night football game, and on a Sunday you figure out that this guy's injured, and now Kieran Amagadzi's your starter at Minnesota after not taking any reps during the week of practice. You're going to put this guy in there. So I think that it's good to have a guy like Shemar Turner that's like, hey, I'm going to lace him up. The trainers are going to have to take me out. And even if the trainers do take me out, I'm going to try to steal a different jersey and go back on the field. And then they're going to have to take me out again. So you're raising the level of toughness on your team, the level of competes. And I love that about a player. When your teammate is willing to go to bat for you, even though he's not feeling 100%, I think that's excellent. Obviously, be safe. But are you injured or are you hurt? Can you play or do you not maybe feel 100%?
The good news, Clay, is that two guys who were, quote unquote, had a reputation of being soft in Nate Davis, Tevin Jenkins, they gone. But I was just thinking it does feel like, guys, in at least the time that I've covered the Bears, or at least since, Matt Eberflus era, this Ryan Poles era, I guess we should call it now, there haven't been a lot of dogs. There have been a few, maybe one or two, but I like that there's somebody coming in that's going to toe that line. And I like that there are people that are being described as nasty players and mean and violent. It just doesn't feel like there have been that many guys like that on this Bears regime and throughout this Bears regime. Obviously, you want high character. There's a difference between high character and you don't have, just because you're high character doesn't mean you're soft, right? You can be high character and be a dog on the field. And it feels like there are a lot of those guys. And you know what? I think that's a sign of the Ben Johnson influence. I think Ben Johnson wants dogs. I think he wants people that are going to toe that line and who are going to play through the whistle. And I think we're feeling the intensity of that throughout this whole entire offseason. So it's exciting. Great stuff, you two. Really good work on those interviews and was great insight. Thanks again to Sean Spencer and Jacob Peeler, the two assistants from A&M and Mizzou. Great insight, and we look forward to getting to know their players some more. That is going to do it for this edition of the Charter Podcast, brought to you by St. Xavier University. We will see you all later this week.